Hello everyone. Great to have an opportunity to speak at the ARM meeting in Rome. I thank the organizers. It's going to be my pleasure to share some information about Autolus, which is a British biotechnology company developing next generation programmed T-cell therapies. We're actually NASDAQ listed, so here's our standard SEC disclaimer. And for us, this year is going to be very much about execution, and since we last met, actually in the Med and the Mesa, we've had a very important development, which is the approval of our first product, Autolus, which is a potentially best-in-class standalone product for adult ALL, and I'll go through some more details in a moment. So really importantly, it's our first product to be launched. I mentioned it's going to be used for adult ALL. It targets CD19, but it does it in a different way with a mechanism which mimics more closely physiological killing of cells. A really, I think, big advance, and not just for ourselves, but also for the field, is this is the first CAR T-cell therapy product that the FDA approved without a requirement for a REMS program. And it's the only product that we've actually got CAR T that's launched with a customized tumor burden guided dosing. So we actually split the dose according to the level of disease that the patient has, and you either get 10 million cells followed by 400 million cells, or you get 100 million cells followed by 310 million cells, depending on whether you are high blast count or low blast count patient, the cutoff being 20% blast. So the products, in principle, is quite a simple product. The idea is that you would bind as tightly to CD19 target antigen, but you actually have a very fast release. And if you look, for example, if you compare the binder for obe-cel, which is a Autolus, with Kymriah, which is FMC63, obe-cel actually in preclinical studies binds, kills, and releases within under 10 seconds, whereas Kymriah tends to get stuck a bit like Velcro and is actually in situ for around 21 minutes. Now, why is that important? It's important because it's actually thought that will actually have three advantages, and it was designed basically to avoid overactivation of CAR T cells, and we thought that what we would see would be reduced toxicities. We would expect to see increased peak expansion, and we would also expect, because the killing is more efficient, we would expect to see less exhaustion of the CAR T cells, so that should improve engraftment and persistence. And persistence may be particularly important actually in adult ALL, because the basic biology of the diseases is that the ALL cells are actually able to, if you like, out-proliferate the ability to kill them within the natural immune defense. So it's going to be important to have a very persistent and comprehensive targeting of the T cells over a prolonged period. So it's always good when a plan works. So that was the plan, and here's the results. This is from the Felix study, which is the basis of the approval. And if you see on the left, what you see is very high rates of efficacy with CR at 77%. If you actually look at patients with low disease burden, that even goes up to 96%, and we'll cover the significance of that in a minute. But that's great. That's a really high level of efficacy. But then if you look at the right, what you were also able to see is that was achieved with very low levels of severe adverse events. So 2% levels of grade 3 or greater CRS, 7% of grade 3 or greater ICANS, which are the most commonly observed and significant adverse events with this class of therapy. So that's really great. That actually, if you like, is the proof of the principle, proof that the design is doing what it's intended to do. But I think probably from a patient perspective, this may be even more exciting. And if you look at the top graph, Kaplan-Meier, what you can see is that 40% of patients actually went into long-term remission without the need for subsequent therapy. And bearing in mind this is a relapsed refractory adult ALL where the patients can have up to 80 or so % blasts, that's really remarkable. Patients who would be expected to have a very short survival, if they had a complete response CRI, they are actually living for a number of months. This is out to 37 months. We're going to actually present further data in an upcoming meeting, but it's really encouraging, and I think one of the first times that we've seen CAR T-cell therapy as a standalone product intervening and giving very long and durable responses. I think the second curve I think is also really interesting because, of course, in a relapsed refractory setting, in a study that is actually a phase 2 study turned registration study, you're obviously getting very sick patients. And one of the observations that we had is if you look at the range of the patients, and the approval is actually based on patients with morphological disease, which is 5% or greater. If you start breaking out by the severity of the underlying disease, what you see is the lower the disease burden, the earlier you intervene, the actual better the results. And clearly, if you're anything less than 75% blast, then you're having a really meaningful, durable benefit with this product. So not surprisingly, we've also been asked to study the product in earlier lines, and we're very open and supportive to the investigator-sponsored studies that we're receiving to actually look at the use of the product in earlier lines. It's a year of execution, and clearly, we've all heard about the challenges of raising finance. So one of the things that's really critical to us is to have a successful launch. And so far, I have to say we're really highly encouraged by the launch experience that we're having. This number goes up almost on a daily basis, but we've actually got 40 centers now primed in the first quarter of the year, ready to be able to deliver Autolus in the US. We're expecting to add about another 30 centers in the course of this year, and then we'll decide if we need to go further than that. That would actually cover around 90% of the current usage of CAR T in ALL. So we're getting to all of the key centers rapidly. Second thing that we actually have done is we obviously, I think we mentioned this in the past, we stood up a manufacturing facility in just over 2 years. That was approved by the FDA and is now providing commercial product with a vein to release of 16 days, which is comparable with industry standard. And that's actually based in Stevenage. The price that we're charging is $525,000 WAC in the US. And I think, one of the reasons, and I'll show you some other success stories in a minute, but one of the reasons we've been successful is because we actually hired a very small but dedicated team. And clearly, this is a business where size doesn't necessarily give you any advantage if you've got the quality of the people in the team who know what they're doing. If you look at the Autolus webpage, what you can see is the number of centers day by day is actually increasing, but that's the picture of the centers that are currently open in the US and able to treat patients. And we've also achieved in the first quarter, we've reached the point at which 85% of the total US lives are actually covered with the product. I think it's really important that we also then, and I'll just mention it before we get there, that obe-cel actually has a lot of other potential uses. But before I get there, I think one other important thing, obviously MHRA and EMA approvals are pending, and we're expecting those before the end of the year, so we'll start the rollout in Europe. So obe-cel is actually interesting. So Autolus is actually interesting because it has lots of other potential uses, and I won't spend too much time on this, but we've got useful data in other B-cell malignancies. If you combine it, which we've done with a novel CD22 targeting element, you've got a really interesting product which actually overcomes potentially antigen negative escape, which may further expand use in B-cell malignancies. If you combine it with a novel BCMA CAR, which we also have, there's a potential for a very interesting multiple myeloma product that may have both deeper cuts and more durable response. So we're looking at all of those things. Why we think it's actually potentially also very valuable in autoimmune is, in addition to the product qualities, which we think will also be appropriate for autoimmune indications, so good safety, a deep cut, persistent product, we believe that we actually have a really good foundation to actually expand into autoimmune, and a number of reasons for that beyond the product characteristics itself. We've obviously established commercial manufacturing. We've got great relationships with the hematologists who will be delivering the therapy, even if it's for autoimmune specialists. And clearly, we've got a very good and solid safety database for this particular product. So we think that there are a number of things in addition to the profile of the product that give us a good lead. We've actually got an SLE study running, and we've completed the enrollment of the first group of patients, the first cohort of patients, and we have an R&D day on April 23rd, and we'll also be presenting the data at upcoming scientific meetings. But, you know, for all those reasons that we mentioned, we believe that we have a very good foundation for moving into autoimmune. I'm only going to mention very briefly a couple of the other products we've got. I think, you know, if you look at the bottom, one interesting one is we've moved the neuroblastoma product for solid tumors into the clinic. That's a product that has a novel targeting element, a GD2 CAR that's selective for high levels of GD2. Also has other features like an off switch, basically a safety valve built into the product. It also has persistence modules, also has modules which can actually switch off, if you like, or manage the tumor microenvironment. We still have the TRBC1 and 2 program, and we have a multiple targeting AML program, which is also about to go into the clinic. So, you know, in summary, very exciting year for us. We're going to give an update on the Felix data in the middle of 2025. We're going to share our first data on SLE, which is also going to establish the dose that we'll use for autoimmune indications. We've got upcoming UK and EU approvals. We also have a pediatric program running for obe-cel, and we'll be sharing some of the data for that in the second half of the year. And then we will actually be providing the full set of data for the SLE study, which is called Carlisle, also in the second half of the year. So with that, and I'm on time, there's about 1 minute more if anyone has any questions, but it was a pleasure to share what's happening at Autolus. So everyone is hungry if there's no questions then. Okay, I'll see you at lunch. Okay, thank you.